Happy Sabbath, church. The joys of doing church with your family. I hope you all have had a wonderful week. It feels like a long time since I've been up here, and it has. Most of you know I had COVID, and it turned into a nasty chest infection. I'm not infectious anymore, which is really good, and it's good to be able to go up the stairs and not struggle to breathe. So I had something hit me hard. Thank you for everybody who's praying for me. I really appreciate it. Just before we get into this morning's message, Barry mentioned the Adra Garfield shop. Now, there has been an op shop out that way, but the Adra Garfield shop is a brand new shop. So they're looking for volunteers at the moment. There's just a couple of people. I went there. I had a look. It's in a really beautiful place. I've never had reason to go to Garfield until yesterday, but if you have time and would love to volunteer, it's a great place to get to know people in the community. And even some of the volunteers have started to come to church as a result of this ministry. So if you're looking for ways to serve, this is a great opportunity. I also just thought I'd give you a little update. As you may or may not know, a few weeks back, I'd been promoting a discipleship program. And some of you guys have been participating. If you've been enjoying it, for those of you, it's a risky question to ask. For those of you, yeah, the hands of the people are there, have been enjoying it. And it's not going to be the last time we do this, but man, I've been really spiritually enriched the last few weeks. Just finding ways to go back into a relationship with Jesus and make it actually a meaningful pursuit, walking and following after Jesus. I'm hoping to run this again next year. This has been a bit of a test pilot, but I think so far so good. Having said that, let's get into the main message for today. As you may or may not know, we've been journeying through the book of Acts, and I've really been enjoying it. Just getting to see the growth of the early church. The church, as we know, it has its origins in the person of Jesus, and when he is resurrected, he leaves this earth, we're just left with a group of disciples who are broken, who all of their hopes are they're trying to make sense of everything, and as they pick up the pieces, God starts to give them a direction. He starts to give them momentum, and we're still feeling the effects of this first church here today. We are here as a direct result of the work that was done 2,000 years ago. So just to get your orientation, the last time I was with you, we looked at the calling of Paul, but we looked at this little missing chapter that Luke glosses over. But we're in this season now. At the beginning of Acts, the writer Luke will say through Jesus that the gospel is to go to Jerusalem. It's then to go to Judea and Samaria. Think of these sort of circles that keep expanding outward. And then it's to go to the whole world. And Luke follows this trajectory as he writes the story of the church's growth. And we've been through the Jerusalem season, and now we're in the Judea, Samaria. Persecution drove the church to grow beyond Jerusalem. And we've seen Paul's sort of journey towards Jesus. But through Paul's journey, we have peppered along the way these other narratives of Peter and Philip and how the church is growing through their dispersal. And we're seeing that the Holy Spirit, particularly today, has goals to reach more than just the people who've been born into God's family, more than ethnic Jews. And as I was thinking about this today, I'm like, we take for granted how big of a deal it was for the message of God to go to people who are not Jewish. I think I've asked this question before. I think, Alma, maybe you might be the only one. But is there anybody in this room who has Jewish heritage? Oh, we got one over here. Okay. Alma, was it you who had Jewish heritage, or was it Olpa? I think, Alma's not listening, but I'm pretty sure there's Jewish heritage there. So we've got two people. But I just want you to imagine for a minute if the message of Jesus was only limited to these two women, right? It's hard to put into context how profound it was for Peter to take a message to people who are not Jewish. And that's the whole point of today's sermon, is to just look at this story. Okay, now I'm going to take this into two parts. First, we're going to see how the Holy Spirit is going to arrive. So we're going to see the story of this man, you may know his name, Cornelius, and how God comes into his life. So we're going to look at this part and lessons we can learn. And then we're going to break down what Peter says to them. Peter's little sermon, if you will. Now, for me, this is it's a topic that's very close to my heart. Let me put it that way. Because what we see here, I think, is a little bit of a template of what it means to be a missional follower of Jesus. That is to say, what it means and what it looks like to be somebody who doesn't just come to church once a week, but somebody who's very interested, somebody who's proactive in seeing the kingdom of heaven move into new places. I love the book of Acts because it shows exactly this. And I'll share a story. Maybe there's going to be a little bit of controversy today. You guys okay for a little bit of controversy? We'll see how we go, right? It's not going to be as big as the great controversy, but it might be a little bit of a controversy. Okay? So I wanted to share with you, this is a very radical thing we're going to see today happen. We'll get into the story right now. If you want to follow along, we're in Acts chapter 10. Okay? And just to bridge, so Paul has experienced a conversion experience. We're skipping over a few little stories. After his time in the Arabian desert, he goes to Jerusalem. And the people in Jerusalem don't know what to do with him. He's so excited, he's so passionate about Jesus, that they send him back home to Tarsus, right? And like I said, there are these stories that are sort of weaving. We got Paul, and now we're going to look at Peter. I know some of you guys might struggle with this. This isn't the controversial thing. I do like a good movie from time to time. And I want you to think of these stories a little bit, it's a little bit like the movie Dunkirk. Did anybody watch that? The World War II film? World War I film, correction. World War I, World War II? World War II. World War II, yes. It's a World War II film. And in the story, you've got the story of a fighter pilot, a British pilot who's trying to wage war from an airplane. You have a story of these soldiers who are trapped on a beach. And then you have a story of a father and a son who are sailing their little tugboat from England to Europe, continental Europe, to rescue soldiers. And you're like, what is going on? These are three separate stories, but they all have a convergence. And Luke is driving at the same thing. The story of Paul, the story of Peter, they seem separate, but they are all going to come together in the spectacular way. So for the moment now, we're focusing on Peter. Paul's off in Tarsus, and now Luke shifts the focus. And he tells this story in Luke 10, and he tells it twice. And he really wants to drive at how important the details of this story are. So the story starts with a man called Cornelius. Cornelius is a Roman centurion. We've seen them before. And every time we've seen a Roman centurion in the New Testament, they are great people of faith. I want you to see that, okay? Here is another centurion, a great man of faith. He lives in Caesarea, which is the capital of that part of the Roman Empire. And what we are told is that he is a man of prayer. He knows about the Jewish God, and from his stationing in Palestine, from his time serving in the area, he has come to learn that there is something different about the God that the Jews worship. So much so that he reads their scriptures and he prays the Psalms. Powerful stuff, right? For this pagan guy to be doing that. He has this vision in one season of prayer, and in verse 4 of chapter 10, an angel comes to this Roman centurion and says, "Your prayers and your alms, your giving, have ascended as a memorial before God." What a profound moment, right? Imagine you're just trying to follow God the best you know how. One day, an angel shows up. I don't know what it looks like when an angel shows up. I've read stories of this, and from what I've gathered, it's very spectacular. It's actually a bit frightening. Okay? I've never talked to a person who's had this first-hand account, but from all accounts, it's a pretty scary thing. So this angel shows up and goes, hey man, you are doing a good thing. Already, if you're a Jewish person reading this story, you're like, what? No, God does not show up to pagans. Maybe Nebuchadnezzar, but that's about it, right? So this is already sort of ruffling your feathers if you're a Jewish person reading this. And the angel goes on to say, and now send men to Joppa and bring one Simon who is called Peter. Peter's in the town of Joppa at the moment. He's just, the story's kind of there, okay? Meanwhile, Peter or Simon is in Joppa. There's this story and he's done this healing. There's a man called Aeneas. There's also Dorcas, this lovely lady who gave so much to the early church. She made cloth. She made clothes for people. And at her death, people are just mourning. They brought the clothes that she made. They just loved her. And Peter, there's this miracle. She's resurrected. It's quite a powerful moment. Okay, there's ministry with families, wonderful. So anyway, this is why Peter finds himself in Joppa. So we have this moment, a God encounter for this Roman man. The next day, Peter's still in Joppa, and we pick up in verse 9. The next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, so this is the centurion's guys, they've been sent to get Peter. Peter went up onto the housetop at about the 6 hours. So we're talking about midday, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. All right? He's on the roof and he's praying. And just remember, every time I see the word praying, I like to emphasize this to you. The book of Acts is full of people who pray. And primarily they are praying scripture. Peter's probably praying the Lord's Prayer, and that's a whole other thing to get into. But they're praying. The Lord's Prayer is all about, our Father who art in heaven. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread. It's a prayer that asks God's kingdom to go out into the world, but also to provide for your daily needs. And it's interesting that we see Peter's on a rooftop, it's lunchtime, he asks somebody in the next verse to get him some food, and he's praying and he's hungry. Let's put all those things together, right? He's on the roof, he's praying this prayer, God's kingdom come, give me some food while you're at it, okay? And then he has this moment. He's praying on a roof, and then he has this vision. You're a good Seventh-day Adventist, you know about the vision, right? Because you've had to defend yourself to all of your Roman Catholic friends about what this vision means, all right? And I'm not saying this to bash on Catholics. When I was growing up, my dad was Roman Catholic, as you know, my grandparents were, and mum was an Adventist. So Ryan didn't eat pork growing up. Ryan didn't eat bacon. Ryan didn't do all of these things. And when I'd go to my grandparents' house, they'd give me this little theological lecture about how Peter had a dream or a vision, and these sheets from heaven came with all sorts of animals, and God said to eat the animals, and Peter was allowed to eat whatever he wants from that point onward. And that's the rest. That's all you need to know about the story, Ryan. You can eat whatever you want. Now eat my bacon. That's literally how I was raised, learning this story, true story. So I'm not here to bash on Catholics, but that's the context I learned this story in. Now there is so much more to the story than the way my grandfather tried to teach it to me. Peter, he's hungry, and a voice from heaven says, hey, eat all of the things. You can eat whatever you see in there. You see that snake? Go for it. You see that pig? Tuck in, son. You see that jumbo shrimp? That's got your name on it. And Peter is disgusted, right? I didn't want to embarrass my wife, but I remember taking her to the Seychelles, and Barry knows this, as us Seychelles, we love some fish, right? And I took her to the markets in Victoria, the fish markets. And if you check out my Instagram, you'll see this. I'm filming my mum, and she's so excited to see this beautiful red snapper. And I pan the camera, and there's Emma, and she looks sick to her stomach. I'm like, does that look tasty to you, this fish? get it out of my face. Like, for Peter, all of these things in front of him were so disgusting. I don't think he was convicted to eat any of these things after this story. Let me be clear on that. This vision of these sheets coming down filled with animals happens 3 times. And Peter is perplexed. It is not obvious to him that he's literally meant to go out and kill a kangaroo and eat it. That's not clear to him. Yeah? The Bible's clear. It's like he's confused. It's clear that he is a confused man, right? And what we are told as he's making sense of this, of what's just happened, 3 guys, the centurion's 3 guys show up. And at this point, if you're a good Jew, you'd see, this was Satan who just tried to talk to me. He tried to appear as an angel of light. He tried to get me to do the wrong thing. All right, and he's wanting me to go for these guys. Like, I think Peter's piecing this together. A good Jewish person would be like, this is a message from Satan. That's how shocking this message is, okay? These guys come along and they say, hey, look, we are here on the bidding of Cornelius, and he wants you to go to his home. A Roman centurion wants you to step into his home. Good Jewish people don't step into other people's homes, right? You just don't do it. I don't know if growing up, did you have the group of people you weren't allowed to associate with? This is why this is a little bit lost on us, because yeah, we've got people who are different culturally to us, religiously to us. We still do life with them. I will still step into the home of my next door Hindu neighbor. So there's a bit of this story that's lost on us, but if you're a Jewish person, you only fraternize with Jewish people. Put it this way, if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, all my friends are Seventh-day Adventists, and I literally have sparing relationships with everybody else. I limit this as much as possible. For the longest time, the Jews have been taught to be separate. Coming out of exile, the reason why we went to Babylon was because we mixed with everybody. It's mixing with everybody that's the problem. So now we are going to take 10 big steps backwards, and we don't want these people to come near us. That is the posture of first century Jews. But Peter realizes in this moment that God is inviting him to do something new. And friends, this is the challenge of the message. My good friend Pastor Josh came last week and said, sometimes we have a spirit of Pharisaism in us. There are moments in our lives where perhaps we play the Pharisee because we are afraid of stepping into the unknown. I often struggle in my adult years reading the stories of Pharisees because I'm like, that guy sounds like a good Seventh-day Adventist Christian. That guy sounds like me at the heart. Jesus is inviting Peter to take a big step into a very unclear, unknown place. And there are some lessons we can learn from this. There are 4 lessons. I want to run through these very quickly to get to the other part of the message. There are 7 lessons here that I think are very important. If we as a church, if we as individuals are serious about taking the message of Jesus, the message of Revelation, the 3 angels' message, if we are serious about taking it to all of the people of the world before Jesus comes, that's what we've been told to do, then we're going to have to be prepared to take that message into some new places. And I think this story, this Peter's posture teaches us, what does it look like to be a person who's anticipating God's leading into some new and dark places? Well, firstly, we see prayer ignites mission. I don't think Peter would have gone to Cornelius's home had he not felt God's leading. And that only came as a result of prayer. I told you guys, I'm always looking at these moments where people are praying in the book of Acts. Why? They are praying for the kingdom to expand. How many of us are actually praying for that? for God's kingdom to expand in my own sphere of influence. At the school that I go to, at the library that I read books at the cafe just up there that I often get coffees to visit members from this church. Am I praying for God's kingdom to be expanded in those places? I think Peter and the people of the book of Acts proactively prayed for this reality. Do we as a church say, we're waiting for Jesus to come? Are we praying for his message to go in, which ushers his coming back? Are we? I'm going to be honest, I don't do it nearly enough. And yet this is a topic I'm passionate about. And in Acts, I'm saying we've got to pray about this. What else do I see? Well, I think Peter had a posture for looking to see where Jesus was about to work. He was ready to go where Jesus was doing something. He was preparing people. And I think the call for us is to be like, God, can you help me to be attuned to where people are becoming receptive to who you are? And can you help me to be ready for when our paths will one day cross and meet? This is what Peter was ready for, right? His prayer had prepared him even to go and do something Jews just never do. His prayers had prepared him, but he was looking for the opportunities to follow where God was leading. This opportunity to follow God is an invitation to embrace the bold and unconventional. And I think for Seventh-day Adventists, this is a real struggle. We have so many good things that we have gleaned over the last 200 years of our denomination's existence. We have a health message. We have Sabbath. We have so many things that we have gleaned. Peter had so many things as a good Jewish person. And yet Jesus, and can you see the awkwardness of this sermon? Jesus is inviting Peter to step into the unknown. I need you to sort of, for a moment, not step away from your faith, not step away from the values you grew up with, but I just need you to trust me where I'm leading you. Can you see that? Please don't hear at the end of this sermon, Pastor Ryan was telling, I'm going to share some things and it'll become clear. I'm not inviting us to do anything crazy, but if God is leading, do we follow? Yeah, we do. Even if it doesn't make sense at the time, let's just trust and place our faith in God. Peter's willing to do something interesting. And I just need you to see this. Where is he? He's in Joppa at Simon the tanner's house by the sea. A Jewish tanner is a man who kills animals and stretches their hides to make leather. This is unclean work. This is geographically a Jewish person doing this would not be in the center of town because it's unclean work, right? You following? So he would literally be on the fringes of the Jewish community. But this is where we see the people who need to interact with God, right? Will you find someone who is looking for Jesus in this church today? Maybe. Are you more likely to find them where the fringes of Christianity bump shoulder to shoulder with the world? In your life, in your workplace, in your school, at your university? Yes. Jesus is inviting us to go to the fringes, to look for the opportunities. Jesus will invite Peter to consider a new way in this. And all of this is challenging for me as somebody who's grown up as a cultural Seventh-day Adventist. I'm not saying this is easy. But in this story, Peter is being invited to consider a new way of seeing and believing. I need you to trust me, Peter. You're going to go into a place where once upon a time, you thought this made you unclean. I've just sent you a dream to eat all of these animals. Just trust where I'm leading. Peter is going to have to be willing to learn something new. Does he learn something new in this story? Do you have something new to learn? My problem that I see with Christians, and I'll pick on our denomination as a whole, is that often we feel like we've learned everything that there is to learn. But I think in the real experiences of day-to-day life, when it comes to person-to-person interaction, man, we have a lot to learn. Jesus is trying to invite us to stretch us. And friends, the people I've seen who've gone to these places, Seventh-day Adventist Christians. These are the people who, once upon a time, were very, I won't say all of us are, to some extent, we've got our ways of doing things, but you see them, they just all of a sudden open up. And there's a posture that changes. There's a willingness to embrace people who don't look like you, who don't speak like you, who don't say like you, who don't think like you. And that doesn't come until you go to the places where these things can happen. If you want to grow your heart for the people who are not of church, come visit ADRA for a few weeks. Come visit ADRA. You'll be stretched. Auntie Mary, has it stretched you coming to ADRA? It stretched her. We've talked about it. But it'll stretch you too. What I find interesting is that this road to a major paradigm shift happens when Peter was hungry. Can you see that was the catalyst in the story? If God's going to stretch us, sometimes we're looking for a big thunderbolt and lightning moment, but the catalyst for the change that Peter went through was, I'm hungry. God used his hunger to show him something very radical. If God's going to lead you to some new places to do ministry, not forsake Adventism, not to forsake your Christian values, but to just go into some new places, look for the little signs. Look for the little ways in which he'll try and speak to you. Look for the ordinary things. In the story, we see Peter get the vision not once, not twice, but 3 times. There was a sense of repetition. For me, the call into ministry, I don't know if I've shared it with you, there was a big call. Leading up to the big call were lots and lots of little calls. 2 people who were key in those little calls were my pastor growing up, Pastor Gungadu and his late wife. When I attended the funeral, I had to tell their son, Daryl, I am here today because your parents were annoying. They kept knocking on my door going, you should be a pastor. You should be a pastor. Have we not told you, you should be a pastor? And it took God doing something a lot bigger, kind of like this story, but it started with little things. And I had to keep paying attention to their annoying perseverance. I told this to Daryl, Pastor Gungadu and Sister Marisa's son. When I told him this, he's like, oh, you're not the first. They've been seeing this potential in people for years and years and years, and they keep on doing it. Maybe God's inviting you to be a catalyst of change in somebody's life. The final step in this thing is, and I want to read this to you, verse 23. This is scandalous. Peter does something which no Jew probably had done at that time, unless you were a bad Jew. He invited them in to be his guests. For all of this, Jews don't mix with people. The big thing that he does, which Jews don't do, he invites unclean people into the house of Simon. Hospitality. I've preached to you guys this before. Sharing meals is powerful. I think it should be one of our fundamental beliefs. All of the stories of Jesus, the stories of disciples, how many people come to faith across a table. How did we receive the symbols of Jesus' broken body and blood across a table? Friends, tables are powerful environments to change. Why do I do half of my visits at a cafe? I like caffeine, but I see the value in a table. Can you see that? So I want to share with you a rough story, and I just got to share it, and then I'll do all of my apologies later. So as you know, I went to America earlier this year, and part of the reason for going, there was a big conference, but Fraser Catton, he's preached here last year, we wanted to find missional churches that are going to the community, people who are going to rough places. Now, I'm not going to say I'm comfortable with this, but I still want to share it with you because it ruffles feathers, I think in the kind of way Peter's feathers were ruffled. You all right? You guys have your seatbelt done? Up? Good. All right. So here is Fraser and I were in Florida, okay? It's hot, as Florida often is. And this is Derek. Derek runs Ginger Beard Coffee. And we had heard about Derek and we wanted to meet Derek. Derek has a rough history growing up in the church, finds Jesus later in life, and prayerfully is going, God, what can I do to reach the people in my life? I don't know how to feel about what I'm about to share with you, but this is Derek's words. Guys, after praying to Jesus about what I should do, I felt led to start a ministry called Beer and Bible. So Derek starts a beer club for all of his friends where they drink beer and read the Bible. And Fraser and I are like, whoa, okay. But he's going to a place where none of us would ever go, right? You can already feel the awkwardness, right? So we didn't know how to feel about that. But he started this ministry, and do you know what? This guy has reached over 50 people with the gospel through this ministry. Am I asking us to go out to the local hotel in Pakenham and start a beer and Bible ministry? No. Please don't hear that. On the camera, I'm not endorsing that behavior. Okay, we're not to go to the pub and start a beer and Bible ministry. Here's what I will say. It's prayerfully that Derek felt led to do this. I'm not saying God's going to lead us to drink alcohol. That would be a very cultish leader thing to do. We are all going to go drink alcohol together and reach Jesus, amen? Very cult leader thing to do. I'm not saying to do that. But where will God lead you into a place of discomfort to share his ministry, right? Where will he lead you? This guy didn't grow up in the Adventist church with our values, with our health message. God used a person who could do that work. I don't think he could use an Adventist person to do this ministry. You don't want to know the latest ministry this guy has. It's a whiskey club. And he says, yeah, it's a whiskey club, guys. And he says, you know, the great thing is I've reached a lot of alcoholics through this ministry because he's like, I can't get into the whole details, but they practice temperance while they drink whiskey, and I don't know how it works. Anyway, we went to visit this guy, and he stopped doing beer and Bible, and he kept praying, God, what do I do next? And he just felt God saying, I need you to start a cafe ministry. And he goes, well, I don't have a cafe. And so God says to him, well, he feels God says to him, but you have a bar. That's never being used during the day. So he goes to the bar owner, who's now a friend, a follower of Jesus. Can I start a cafe during the day? It's residential area above. Above us is residential apartments. So the guy's like, sure. Now, this little fridge-looking thing is the latest offerings in the cafe industry from Caltech. Caltech's a big university. That little fridge-looking thing is a coffee roaster. And that's a $50,000 investment. But after COVID, Derek said there were so many people who are now working from home, and I wanted to reach them. I felt God led me to start this cafe ministry. We went to Derek's home to a small group Bible study. And all of these people stepped through this bar to get into Bible study. Most of these people aren't in Beer and Bible or the Whiskey Club. There's Pastor Fraser and I. They were talking about the Sabbath that day, and they were very confused, and the Seventh-day Adventist pastors helped clear some things up, guys. But all of these people, we got to talk to them, we met them, we heard their stories. Some of them never grew up in church. Some of them went to church and left when they were 12. Some of them had loose connections with church through television ministries. But it was through Derek's boldly following Jesus into an uncomfortable place that directly led to those people encountering Jesus. Half of them, I think, were baptized. Some of them were on that journey still, not sure. And I was challenged. Are you challenged? I'm not saying we need to start a cafe. I'm not saying we need to go to the bar. But where is Jesus going to prayerfully lead you, our church, to start a ministry for him? What uncomfortable place is he inviting you to go? One of our relatives, he felt God called him to go to Papua New Guinea and start a ministry with a leper colony. And God said to this guy, I need you to go to this leper colony. There's many pastors have been before, but the difference with you is you're going to let them hug you. And these lepers had been told, this pastor's coming and you can hug him. And I remember him telling us this story for the very first time, when all of these people, they came and they started to hug him and they were crying and in their pidgin English saying, we feel like Jesus is here because you've allowed us to hug you. We've had no one hug us for 5 years, 10 years. You don't have to go to a bar for Jesus to invite you to go to the fringes where nobody else will go. Where is he inviting you? Where is he inviting our church to go? Spent enough time on this. That's all the slides there is. I did want to spend just a little bit of time looking at what Peter says. What Peter says is in verse 28. He gets to Cornelius' home and Cornelius starts to worship Peter. That's how profound this God encounter was for Cornelius. He thought that Peter was God, maybe some godlike being. And Peter opens, and I think to myself, is this what you should say to a person? Peter says this very tellingly in verse 28. You yourselves know, everybody knows this, and I kind of feel people know this about Adventists. You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a Jew to associate with or to visit anyone of another nation. I feel like the people in my life who aren't Adventists, you guys know that Ryan doesn't eat pork and Ryan doesn't go to bars and Ryan doesn't, do your friends know this about you? They know. And I'm just like, what a way to open up this conversation. We know that there are differences between us, right? But God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without objection. I asked then, why have you sent for me? Again, this was a challenge I had, and I was praying for it through this week. I'm like, and I think this is just a prayer we all need to pray. But who are the people in my life that I don't want to rub up against? I don't want to do life with. Maybe we don't think of them as unclean, but we don't think that you're in my league and that I should do ministry with you. I'll share you an example of this. We had a ministry at the last church I was at, and during COVID, I went a lot. It was an ADRA ministry. We served the community food, and a lot of the people that came to church as a result were lower socioeconomic people. And I don't think I'll ever forget this, but one of my members, he meant well. He goes, yeah, Ryan, I really think we should be targeting the middle-class people because that's who our church members are. It's all fair and good to reach these people, but we don't have anything in common with them. I think we should leave them alone. And I was like, I think we have a problem in the church if we think like this. Who are the people that I won't meet with, I won't mix with, I won't associate with, for whatever reason? God is challenging us to see these people as his children. Yes, we say it, we sing it, but do you believe it? That standing next to you or standing across from you is a person who is an image bearer of God. That is what Peter had learnt. That was the paradigm shift he had gone through. Now, I want to read to you verse 34 through to verse 42, but it's quite long and there's quite a bit, but I'm going to summarize. In this passage of scripture, Peter will recount the story of Jesus. He is going to take a very Jewish history and make it relevant to somebody who's not Jewish. And that's the invitation we are being made to do today. I think there's a bit of a template in this passage. He takes the Jewish story of the Creator God, whose goal is to bring the world back together again. His goal is to bring people back to the garden to be in communion with him. This is what Peter basically articulates. He's going to accomplish that work through an anointed king, a Messiah, a Christ, a Jesus. He goes on to describe all of this, and he says it's this Messiah king that is going to make the world right. And I have to ask myself, this message seems that it was relevant to a Roman centurion. And so in some ways, this must form a template for how we share Jesus. I want to read verse 43. Peter says, to him, this is Jesus, all the prophets bear witness that everybody who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. The other verse I wanted to message, which I jumped over, is, let me just backtrack, verse 36. As for the word that he sent Israel, preaching good news of peace through Jesus Christ. At the heart of the message that Peter brings to Cornelius, it's a message of peace and it's a message of forgiveness. I preached to you last year Jesus' manifesto where he goes in his little town of Nazareth. Here's what I've been called to do. Here's what I've been called to proclaim. And he says, I've been called to proclaim, liberty to the captives. That word liberty is literally the word we translate as the word forgive. The work of Jesus is not only to forgive people of the sins, but to liberate them from sin. Can you see that? Is that good news for your life? I just want you to think about the sins and the struggles you've had, and to know that there is a king, there is a God who within his power, as you work with him, can liberate you from the effects of sin in your life. Man, that's a God I'm willing to follow. There are things I will not share about my life, but man, there are some things I've wanted God to heal over the years. And it's only this God that I have read that can do that. And it's the reason why I follow this God. It's the reason why this God is the hope of the world. Yes, he can forgive, but he also has the ability to cleanse you, to make you new again. Is that the message we are sharing with the people in our lives? So Peter shares the message of Jesus, the message of forgiveness. It's a message of peace. The context of peace, friends, it's not just a random, it's not just some really ethereal sense of peace. It's a sense of peace between the nations of the world. You know me, I can dig out all the scriptures for this. We just don't have the time. If you've been following the news, and I know being the good Adventist Christians you are, you guys love to follow the news, is the world a fractured place right now? Man, yesterday I was doing a lot of driving around and I was listening to this podcast about the riots in the United Kingdom. At the heart of those riots are ethnic differences. And I struggled listening to this. I'm like, Jesus, you asked me to preach about peace, and I have a very strong opinion about this subject matter. And if I understand what you're saying and act correctly, you're inviting me to bring a message of peace to these people I struggle to see eye to eye with. Who do you struggle to see eye to eye with? Do you know that God has a message of peace for them? I want to wrap up. The challenging part of the story, there is this sermon that Peter shares. It's not a challenging part. Well, it kind of is challenging. Because we read in verse 44, while Peter was still saying these things, the Holy Spirit fell on all who heard the word. And the believers from among the circumcised, we're talking about the Jewish Christians who came along with Peter, they were amazed because the gift of the Holy Spirit was poured out on even the Gentiles. I want to jump to the next chapter. Peter is now recounting this story, and what we see is that some of the followers of Jesus start to take issue with the fact that he's done exactly the thing that he's done. He has gone to a group of people he shouldn't have gone to. He's broken every rule about what it means to be a Jewish follower of Jesus. How dare he take Jesus into a new setting? How dare he do that? In verse 2 of chapter 11, so when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the circumcision party criticized him. This is where I want to land, because this is the challenge I felt. If God's going to lead you into some new places, be ready for criticism. Be ready for criticism. Probably some of us have leveled criticism for people who've gone into new places for Jesus. But when you feel God move so strongly on your heart to go do something that nobody else is doing, it's so easy for everybody to throw rocks and stones at you. Friends, if we are serious as a denomination about Jesus coming back, and that happens as we share his message, right, we are going to have to go to some new places. People will throw rocks at us. People will throw rocks at you because of the things you're doing in his name. And the question is, are you going to be motivated by fear and paralyzed by fear? Or are you going to embrace the leading of Jesus and go where he follows? There's a song that we sing with our kids, and it goes, wherever you lead me, I'm going to follow. I'm trusting you, God. You are good. Life will be amazing, wild and crazy. I'm trusting in you, God. You are good. Are you going to trust God as he sends us into some crazy places? Or are we going to sit and be comfortable and throw stones? I'm going to invite our music team to sing our final song. And as we sing that song, may we allow ourselves to follow where Jesus leads as we prayerfully sing this song. Thank you.